Now, a few of you who were using the Mac and Cloud accounts expressed that you weren't unable to connect to the Mac um, with the information provided, and you were unable to, or you did not know what to do afterwards. So, the first thing I want to say is that this was covered in class extensively. So, those of you who did not take notes should have referred back to the iOS Essentials PDF book that was provided for you in Blackboard that we covered within the first week of class. So if you opened the Mac and you logged in, you didn't know what to do after you launched Xcode, you should have referred to your notes or referred to the PDF book that was provided in Blackboard. So all that to say, that does not absolve you of the responsibility of trying to figure something out when you don't know what to do, especially if we've already covered it in class. The second thing I want to mention is that there was a PDF provided of the full project. So if you did not know what to do, if you would have referred to your book and referred to that PDF, you should have been able to pick up where we left off, especially if you were in class. If you were not in class, then it was your responsibility to reach out to one of your classmates who was to bring you up to speed on what we have missed. That being said, I'm going to show you from start to finish how to connect to the Mac and Cloud account and then also launch and create a new project in Xcode. So you have the server name and information. You go to the URL here that's provided in the Google Doc, put in the server name and hit connect. Once you hit connect, it should launch in your browser a remote desktop view of the Mac and Cloud account. And then we can use the credentials that I provided each of you to actually log into the Mac and Cloud. Now, once it authenticates you, it's going to launch the exact Mac desktop as if you were actually using it on your computer. It might take a little bit of time, but this is the only alternative we have unless you plan on purchasing a Mac. If you want to get the gist of this course and be successful in this course, you will have to put some work into actually doing some things on your own. I expressed this requirement early in the beginning of the class and stated emphatically how important it is for you to spend time outside of class reinforcing the concepts. We only meet 90 minutes twice a week, and we cannot possibly cover everything in each of those classes. So it is important that you take notes in class and be able to use Google, use the handouts to pick up where we left off to get your projects done. It will not be acceptable in the future that you say to me, I logged in and then I didn't know what to do. That is not an acceptable answer, and that is not an answer that will get you a passing grade in this course. So I'm waiting for the session to begin. Sometimes when this happens, what I might do is refresh the screen. If I refresh the screen, I enter credentials again. Launch back to waiting for session, and now it should actually launch the Mac desktop. So you can use this application window to go ahead and launch Xcode. Now, some of you expressed that this screen is a little slow for you. Yes, it might be not ideal, and it's not going to be exactly as if you were working on a real live desktop, But unless you have about $1,700 to buy a brand new Mac, or you can find a relatively cheap used one for about $1,000, this is pretty much your option for right now. So I tend to actually just search for the application I want to open. Xcode comes up, and I can see from here that out of 6 to 9 of you, only one person has actually attempted to actually create the project. In the future, it might be simpler if you add your name to the actual app. So, for instance, if it was me, it'd be Randy Minesweeper. And that way we can sort of keep track of whose app is where. So once you get to this screen, if you want to create a new Xcode project, this is not rocket science to figure out that you would actually create new Xcode project. We're starting with a single view application, as we discussed in class. You hit next, you name it. And you select the language as Swift, because we agreed at the beginning of class that we will be using Swift. You also change the device to iPhone for this particular application, and we're not including UI tests or unit tests. We're just using core data. You can uncheck use core data as well. We haven't really talked about core data. We'll be talking about core data in level 2. But core data is, it will bring in the libraries necessary to actually store data on the user's device in the instance if you were creating an app to track tasks, right? So in an app to track tasks, the individual would add a new task, they can get their task, they can delete their task. And since it would require the usage and storage of data over time, we would use core data because we would need to store that information in a database. And in this case, it would be a local database on the user's phone, which isn't necessarily accessible on multiple devices, because in that case, we would be using a cloud solution. So anyway, you name your product app, you select the language, you select the device, uncheck include unit tests, uncheck include UI tests, hit next. And it's going to ask you, where do you want to store this app? And the desktop is fine for now. Some of us tend to create folders and put Xcode projects or whatever have you. As long as you know the name of your app, then you know, and where you kept it when it's time to send that app to me to submit an assignment, which we did talk about in our last class, you'll know where to find it, to create a zip file, to send me that file. So we click create, and here is where you get your app. So we talked about the app delegate file, we talked about the viewcontroller.swift file, and the main storyboard. If you are confused on any of these things, you should refer to your notes. I am not going to revisit this at this stage in the course, because at this point, if you haven't finished this app, we are actually moving on to creating a new app, and you do need to understand the basics of creating a single view app, and editing these files and knowing what to put in each of these files. So your main storyboard is your user interface, where you're actually going to place the visual objects that the user will see here, and you will set certain attributes for those items. And then in the viewcontroller.swift is where we've been putting our variables and our code that connects the user interface to the actual functions and methods that you will be using during your app, that actually creates the interactive experiences that the user will see. So if there's any mystery for any of you about how to do this, this is the starting point for getting into the macInCloud account, creating a basic iPhone single view app. And then you should be able to launch the PowerPoint that was provided in the Blackboard account to pick up from there. We did do a huge portion of that in class. I am not going to revisit that. You will need to try to figure it out. Do what you can. Email me after you've done what you can, and we'll go from there. Thankfully, this app is not required of you to submit. However, the next app, you will be required to submit it. So if you need to familiarize yourself with the basics that we've already covered in class, it is imperative that you use YouTube, Google, your notes, your documents to refresh yourself on what was covered. I cannot go back and cover 4 or 5 weeks of material to bring you up to speed. So good luck, and I hope this was helpful, and you have a splendid evening.